It is Friday, November 20th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Obviously, we had a longer break, but not from uploads, because we were covering the PlayStation 5 launch week. The console is finally available in the US, Canada, Japan, New Zealand. Most of Europe launched yesterday. The console is now available, and Sony was celebrating on a global scale. Many notable places around the world were taken over by PlayStation marketing, and it was really cool to see, of course. I think that's probably the most exciting thing we could really have outside of, your typical launch parties, which we couldn't really do during COVID times, but still exciting to see from the comfort of our homes nonetheless. Sony obviously went all out, and that was really exciting to see. But the console is finally available, and so now we can continue our Friday uploads here on this channel covering the world of PlayStation. Let's start as always with our PS Plus reminder. That's Hollow Knight Voidheart Edition, Middle-earth Shadow of War, Bugsnax for PS5 owners, and remember, you can claim this through PC, mobile, if you're just on PS4 right now, but you're still claiming just the PS5 version, so you have to wait till you get a PS5 to play the game. And also, we did get confirmation for the PS Plus collection that very much is a benefit for PS5 owners, as in you have to claim them through a PS5 console. They are PS4 games, so you can claim them and play them on a PS4, but you have to claim them through a PS5. So, in theory, if you have a friend that has a PS5 right now, they can log into your account, claim the games, then you can go back, log into your PS4, and play them that way. You would have to arrange it to get the games right now, at least, on PS4 without a PS5. Now, getting into our first news story, PS4 Firmware 8.01 is available right now, and sure enough, this is a smaller update, so it's an improvement to system software stability, and that's always good to see, but we also got this for PlayStation 5. That's right, our first PS5 system software update, and this time around, Sony has changed the numbering convention for their firmware updates, so a little bit more complicated to keep track of here, but a lot more numbers involved. So for PS5, the latest software update is 20.02 2.25.00. And what's funny about this is many people didn't realize that they actually installed this new update if you have the console already, because by default, PlayStation 5 is set to not only download these updates, but install them in rest mode. And because the numbers are longer, it's not easy to see what you may already have, and so a lot of people are already on this, even when they manually check their system software and see that it's completely up to date. Now, this may very well be one of the few examples we have where we're actually excited to see an update for system performance versus brand new features, because PS5's first week did have a number of problems being reported, but this is something that I cautioned prior to the console coming out, which is for PS5 and even Series S and X, on day one, millions of people are going to be playing this thing. Any product for that matter is going to have a failure rate on day one, and there's going to be issues being reported. And so whether it's rebuilding the database from rest mode, external drives, certain error codes, games crashing, we're going to see this stuff, and that's exactly what is happening, but we don't know how widespread any of these things actually are. And so I know it's quite easy to look at a Twitter or a Reddit thread and see 200 plus replies, maybe even up to 1,000 replies of people all reporting the same thing or similar issues, but that would still be a drop in the bucket compared to the millions of machines that were sold on day one. And so I know people are getting a little cautious about when they get their PS5. Should I use an external drive? Should I use rest mode? The thing is, or at least the encouraging thing that we're seeing so far, is that there are a lot of issues being reported, but it's not really consistent. I mean, some of them are very similar, like Spider-Man Remastered in rest mode seems to have an issue for some people. Games not installing properly. We're seeing issues with cross-gen games, actually, people playing the PS4 version by mistake, so you have to manually check which version you have and either go to the store or go on the main home screen and make sure that you check off the version that you're actually playing. External drives, we're seeing an issue. Depends on the drive, depends on what port you plug it into. It seems like the front USB-C is the most reliable, which for me, the only problem I ran into was I couldn't launch PS4 games from external or internal. So I had to do a full system restore, and that got it working for me. So yeah, there are definitely problems out there, but you have a 1-year warranty. So even if you don't have a machine just yet, when you buy one, 1-year warranty, and this is the growing pains of a brand new product. So you are an early adopter if you're playing right now. This is going to happen. And so it looks like there's not one thing that's sticking out too much right now, and that's probably the best case scenario. And actually, while we're speaking of best case scenarios, let's point out an error that actually works in your favor. Some people have reported for digital edition PS5s getting a disc console instead. And so what's even greater is that I haven't seen any reports of the opposite happening, which would really bone you if you ordered, say, a disc PS5, got the digital edition. Some people with digital consoles are getting disc machines, and so that's really interesting, because this is already a low volume console. So I don't know how many machines are affected, but there have been a handful of people that said, yes, I really did get a disc console from the digital edition box, And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, unless you really were adamant about having a slimmer, uniform profile for that console. But either way, I say you made out pretty well in that circumstance if it happened to you. Next up, it would be remiss of me to not point this out, but we've been speaking in the context of owning a PS5, and many people may not actually have a PS5 just yet. For one reason or another, if you're still trying to order the console right now, between the very few restocks that do happen, you're fighting bots, scalpers, genuine folks that are trying to order, and so it's been an incredibly frustrating experience, and I know it sucks, it really does, but again, we were expecting this. Every console that gets made is going to get sold. And so it's not going to be easy if you still don't have a machine right now and you are trying. But what's important is looking at that first quarter of 2021 and seeing what the supply looks like from that point forward. And, well, what we've got here is a quote from Sony Interactive Entertainment President CEO Jim Ryan speaking to the BBC, where he says, "We're making more PS5s in this difficult environment than we made PS4s in that launch. If people are unable to find one at launch, we're very sorry and apologetic about that. They can rest assured we're working really hard to get significant supplies into markets before and after Christmas." So there is more on the way, and there's your reconfirmation that there is more availability versus what we saw with PS4 in 2013, which by the end of that year, Sony sold 4.2 million PS4s. So in theory, you have more opportunity here, even though it doesn't feel like it. They are making as many as they reasonably can without sacrificing the quality assurance of the product. But what's really annoying is just how retailers have handled this. And so, like, in the UK, for consoles that were already ordered, not only is the delivery process for that ridiculous, I really feel for you there, but the checkout process for so many sites, like, why is there not CAPTCHAs involved? Why is there not reservation and cart? I mean, there's a number of things you can do to streamline this and make it a little bit easier and at least soften the blow for when you don't get a console, right? I mean, there's got to be a certain level of opportunity here that can happen for genuine customers and not bots or scalpers. But that's also just inherently going to happen with the scalping. Even you can combat bots, but there is going to be resellers profiting off of it. For our next news story, let's talk about game sales, specifically for Ghost of Tsushima. It's been confirmed the game has now sold over 5 million copies worldwide in just 4 months, which is incredible. Not only is 5 million on its own very good in that short amount of time, but this easily puts it on track to be another major Sony blockbuster where within its first year on the market, it could probably reach upwards of 7, 8, maybe even 9 million. Really depends on the long-term support from Sucker Punch, which we didn't even really expect for this type of game, and yet that's exactly what we're seeing, which is great. The game looks beautiful on PS5, by the way, but much deserved, and this definitely just adds more weight to Sony's decision for doing these larger, big-budget, narrative-driven experiences that, take millions and millions and millions of dollars to make, but this is a new IP. It paid off. I'm sure they're quite pleased with that. Same for Spider-Man, actually. That game also apparently reached 20 million. That's our new figure. The last time we got a figure for this game was, or an official figure was around 13 million, but there's been murmurings that it was hovering around 18 million or 17 million, which is very high. That easily puts it at one of the most sold PS4 games ever. Definitely not going to be the last time we see Spider-Man. I would love to see the Miles Morales numbers, at least initially, which I'm sure we'll get very soon. We'll also see more new IP out of Sony, but that all really went without saying. Anyway, moving on, and back to Jim Ryan, actually. The president and CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment has been very busy this past week. Of course, he does have to do a lot of PR for the major product launch that he just oversaw, so we have a lot to go over from Jim Ryan. But starting off with game pricing, first off, he denies that they considered more than $70, but he does consider that the price that they set for their first-party games at $70, they consider it fair. And so he was quoted saying, yes, I do consider £70 to be a fair price. If you measure the hours of entertainment provided by a video game such as Demon's Souls compared to any other form of entertainment, I think that's a very straightforward comparison to draw. So, first off, I don't think this company would ever confirm a report suggesting that they were considering charging more than $70 for their products. Even if the decision was $70, why would you confirm, yeah, we're thinking about more? It just doesn't look good on your end. Also, his price comparison, I mean, to be fair, it's not exactly wrong. You do get more value versus other entertainment mediums. I know I could have sacrificed 5 or 6 visits to Taco Bell to easily get a copy of Demon's Souls, but, that's neither here nor there. It's all relative. So it goes back to our conversation we had during, what was it, the last episode, where, I don't really fall into that mindset of hating every single decision that these multi-billion-dollar publishers and manufacturers make when it comes to selling their products. More often than not, you're not really forced to buy anything. And so there are certain predatory practices, but at least in the lens of, let's say, a single player game that you're not expecting expansion content, or if you do, it's premium content that, let's say, is $10, $15. It adds a meaningful amount to the base game, and you're okay with that. It's all relative to what you feel comfortable with paying. Games devalue. You don't have to buy anything. That's just always been my mindset, and it's always worked out for me as a consumer. You have all the power with your wallet, so you don't have to buy these products from these big companies when they release a game at, say, $70, or a season pass, or microtransactions. There's a different conversation to be had about the monetization efforts for these games, say with multiplayer components that skews the player base, and obviously the pay-to-win model. I mean, that's a whole separate topic, but just in general, when it comes to being charged more for games, you don't have to buy right away. You can wait for games to devalue. Now, Jim Ryan did also acknowledge the SSD storage space on PS5 and how it might be a concern for some people when they install a lot of games, or larger games like Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, which is, upwards of 150 to 200, somewhere around there. It's an ungodly amount of gigabytes for your system, but this is also something where it's not a very favorable answer. He says, we're not hearing that in the context of it being a concern. He says, we'll obviously watch what happens as people unbox their PlayStations and start to use them. We think we'll be okay. We obviously are able to monitor hard drive usage on the PS4 microscopically, and everything that we saw there indicates that we should be fine. Now, this comes off incredibly tone-deaf in the current situation we're in, which is the PS5 launch cycle, meaning that if you have a PS5 right now, or you're trying to buy one, you're probably a very engaged consumer. If you're watching this channel, this probably irks you because you know that you are an engaged customer that buys a lot of software, that will have a lot of games downloaded at any given moment, and so you may want a lot of storage, and it's good that we have the option to expand. Just that hearing this is like, really? Like, how could you say that you're not hearing any issues? But down the road, and what he's talking about with being able to analyze the PS4's hard drive space over that install base, which they can absolutely do, they look at these things and base their decisions off of that. And so for PS4, I'd imagine that they definitely saw that they can get away with less storage space on PS5, which it was expected to see 1 terabyte. They went with a customized 825 because it, price per gigabyte, they can save a little bit in the long run over millions of consoles being manufactured and sold. And when it comes to most consumers, they probably will get away with that very easily, where somebody would never even be concerned with their SSD space because they buy, let's say, a handful of games every single year, and once they finally get that notification for their SSD space being full, they'll just delete, Madden, 22 off of it, or last year's Call of Duty or whatever. I mean, most consumers, this might not be an issue, but for some of us that are here right now, it's a problem, and that's why we want external drives. We want drives to be whitelisted for internal storage, things like that. Now, moving on, we've got more Jim Ryan quotes to go over here, this time from GQ Magazine. That had a pretty lengthy interview, but a lot of solid stuff in there, and here are 3 noteworthy Q&As that I want to pull out. First off, they ask, to go out on this kind of a limb is a sign of your design team's confidence, isn't it? He says, one of the challenges that I've been dealing with is trying to ensure that confidence doesn't spill over into complacency, particularly team members who joined us since the PS4 launch who have only known really good and successful and profitable times. I keep trying to say, hey, hold on, it's not always like this, and don't take it for granted. I love this answer. This is a concern I've brought up a few times on this channel over the years, where with PS4's market leadership, I don't want them to slip into a point of complacency and then bringing that into PS5. They have had low points like PS3 and Vita, and so while I know oftentimes people don't like Jim Ryan or the decisions that he makes, you need somebody that has that perspective. And for Jim Ryan, he's been there since 1994. He's overseen pretty much every major product launch, and so I think it's important. Now, when talking about streaming and subscription models, they ask, how do you see the landscape changing over the PS5's lifespan? He says, it seems that I've spent most of my life at PlayStation listening to people tell me that this generation is going to be the last one because something else is going to make the console model redundant. I'm sure these people are really wise and really intelligent, but to date, they haven't been correct. This is why Sony has been somewhat conservative with PlayStation 5 in general, in that they've said we believe in generations. They are still sticking with the traditional model of, here's a box, here's a $60, now $70 video game, here's a big budget video game. They have subscription models, they have Plus, they have Now, right? They dabble in these things, and they are getting a little bit more platform agnostic with some PC releases, but not quite to the effect of what Microsoft's doing, right? That's why we often remind ourselves that there is a very large diverging path, and even Microsoft's been very forward about, hey, maybe you shouldn't look at console sales, look at our overall player base, our customer satisfaction, and there's obviously a lot of reasons why they want to explore that path, but you know, it's just, there are very two different goals at play here. They then ask, in the context of Spider-Man Miles Morales, is that something you'll play with your family? How do you tend to play at the moment? He says, I only just got my PS5 at home. I've played the games quite a lot in the office, but it'll be a busy weekend. He says that he only just got his PS5 because he wants to lead by example, more or less, whatever that means, but interesting that he's just now getting his console set up at home, which seems to be the case for a lot of Sony employees. When the launch actually happened, a lot of posts going up on Twitter of a lot of people either from Sony First Party or PlayStation Corporate in San Mateo just now getting their PS5s on day one. And finally, we have one more Jim Ryan quote where he thanks the PlayStation community over on the PS blog. He says, "It's an exciting time, and we're so grateful that you're here with us. Thank you for trusting us and for being so patient this year. We created PS5 for you, and you have been the center of our strategy since Ken Kutaragi envisioned the very first PlayStation. Today, I just want to simply say thank you, and here's to the dawn of a new generation of gaming." It's a little sappy, and they do want you to just buy their product and then spend a lot of money on it. But hey, I'll buy into it. It is an exciting time, a brand new PlayStation console. Some of us have been here from the beginning. Maybe we bought in during 2 or 3, a PSP, or maybe this is your first console and your day one launch. It's just, it is still fun. We're all here for games, and I'm sure the team at PlayStation, all the developers at SIE, all the third-party developers out there have worked very hard in this very difficult time with working from home, changing their workflows, and we know that the gaming industry is often not a very safe business, financially speaking, so it's tough to work into it, but I want to also thank everybody that's been involved as well. Moving on to our next news story, it looks like there is hope for 1440p support on PlayStation 5, or at least a small ounce of hope. PlayStation's Masayasu Ito did mention to AV Watch that there's nothing really stopping them from adding this functionality, just that it wasn't on their priority list, and so you can keep demanding for the feature. Hopefully they consider it and add it down the road through a system software update. I still wouldn't hold out hope for this. A very small amount of users actually use this. It's not common to use it on console, and so you just have to keep that perspective in mind that you may never actually get this feature, but continue to be vocal, and hopefully they do add it. Options are always better. Moving on to Astro's Playroom, Nicholas Doucette, the creative director and studio director at SI Worldwide Studios, did post on the PlayStation blog kind of as more of a promotional write-up for the game, you know, what's inside it, what you can expect, things like that. But towards the bottom he says, "It is preloaded in every PS5, meaning it is our gift to you, the amazing PlayStation community. We would not be here without you and wanted to show you our most sincere appreciation. Astro will be back with news soon. Until then, have a great time with your PS5, and above all, stay warm and safe." So, Astro will be back with news soon. It is great to see how many are enjoying Astro's Playroom, because it is such a beautiful, fun, colorful platformer that really utilizes the DualSense features, and what's great about it is that there is no barrier of entry. It's free, and you can play it with the controller that's shipped in the box, but Astro is an established IP. It was there in the Playroom, day one for PS4, but you needed the PlayStation camera. Then we had Astrobot Rescue Mission, but you needed PSVR, so they do use this character, and they're really fun games. But this is the first time where most people can really play it and see how fun it is, and so now everybody wants more Astro, and that's great. I'm loving that aspect of it too. But it's clear that they were going to be using this character in more ways, and it really depends on if that's going to be a project that can actually be sold now, because the PSVR game was a little bit more specialized. It's a great game, but it wasn't really a high-volume game, so maybe they might have larger aspirations for Astro. Next up, we have a rumor that Bluepoint Games might be getting acquired by Sony Interactive Entertainment, and that if this deal actually finalizes and goes through, we'll see the announcement of this acquisition at least by the end of February 2021. So this rumor comes from Reset Era, the user Marzipan Rumpan. They had a pretty long write-up here, but some of the key takeaways is that they don't want to do remakes forever. They want a shot at a new IP. They want some financial stability. They have a good working relationship with Sony. And for Sony, this was basically their test bed. Demon's Souls was going to be their make or break before these conversations of getting acquired actually took place. They can cross over some of their technologies with their other teams. Again, great working relationship. and that they're very impressed with Bluepoint's work ethic and that they fit the bill for joining SIE. And the user actually mentions he couldn't verify the sources 100%, but basically he feels confident and that he would actually accept a ban on Reset Era if this announcement doesn't happen by February 28th. Which, if there was ever a right way to post a rumor on the internet, this is probably the way to do it. Just being transparent and saying, look, I can trust one source, not the other. If it doesn't happen by this date, ban me, chastise me, whatever. That seems reasonable. I'll give credit where it's due. But the rumor itself is also reasonable in that, yeah, this totally works out. Makes a lot of sense. Bluepoint would be a fantastic fit, I think, for SIE, and we know that Sony is very slow, methodical, and deliberate in their acquisitions. They're not quite like Microsoft where they money hat everywhere, or like they have been doing for the past 2 years. I think we just had a conversation about this, but they do have a slower evaluation process, and so when you look at Bluepoint's portfolio, they have taken on contract work outside of Sony, but the vast majority of their portfolio is Sony. So I think they do fit the criteria very well. They have done a fantastic job, and they have grown organically over the years. And so what's encouraging is that under Sony's ownership, they can foster that talent even larger, a lot of that cross work with the tech that they build. And so this is something where it makes too much sense. So I hope it does happen. We'll keep our eyes peeled. For our next news story, we have an update on the Bethesda acquisition with Microsoft, the possibility of more PlayStation releases. This is something where we've actually had a lot of updates for this, and I've filmed them for LTPS, but then I cut them because, one, the show's getting way too long, and then two, every time I cover it, I pretty much say the same thing I said in our initial video covering the announcement, if you remember that. I did a video right away giving my thoughts on it, and I didn't want to keep repeating myself in those stories, so I just cut them every time, but I will keep this one in because, well, this seems like a more notable story to cover here, but it looks like Xbox CFO Tim Stewart has given probably the most direct answer on the possibility of PS releases so far, where he was quoted saying during a conference, but what we want is we want that content in the long run to be either first or better or best or pick your differentiated experience on our platforms. We will want Bethesda content to show up the best as on our platforms. He then says, yes, that's not a point about being exclusive. That's not a point about we're being adjusting timing or content or roadmap. But if you think about something like Game Pass, if it shows up best in Game Pass, that's what we want to see. And we want to drive our Game Pass subscriber base through that Bethesda pipeline. So building up to this, the stories that I didn't include in LTPS, a handful of ones, Microsoft saying that they can't comment on it because the acquisition didn't go through. More ambiguous answers. Phil Spencer at one point told Kotaku that he doesn't have to do PlayStation releases or Nintendo releases to make back that $7.5 billion. There's probably 2 or 3 other ones. There's actually been a few ambiguous answers, but that's all they are, ambiguous. I mean, clearly they're not going to give a direct answer. In fact, I think it would be somewhat strange if they directly said, yeah, once this goes through, those games are, we're never releasing PlayStation games ever again, or things like that. You almost have to give a vague answer. You can't show your cards on what you want to do with this $7.5 billion acquisition. But once again, my thoughts are the same on this from my initial video at least, which up to this point seems like it actually turned into a very hot take. And in that video I said, look, it's a lot of money, but this is probably a situation of some of these games will go exclusive, but some probably still will come to PlayStation. But what that will look like is $70 games there, and then Game Pass games over there. And so the real benefit that's not being taken away from Microsoft is that you're getting Elder Scrolls 6 day one on Game Pass, which is an absolute steal, right? It's crazy. If you got a PC or an Xbox, it's going to be $15 a month to jump into the next Elder Scrolls, which is a huge deal. And if they own Bethesda, if they own this publisher and all these games, I mean, a software sale is a software sale. That's why Sony's being somewhat more platform agnostic with PC releases. That's why Microsoft's been doing this, because they don't really care where they sell their games or services. It's money in their wallet. And so people consistently keep saying up to this point, you don't spend $7.5 billion to release on the competitor, but I'm sorry, just it seems to make the most sense to me that for some of these larger IP that are clearly going to do millions of copies, you can sell at $70 on PlayStation and do quite well while not stunting any growth for Game Pass, because Game Pass has had incredible growth with, I think still there's so much more room for them to grow. When you look at the library of it, which it's about 200 games on console only, 350 something when you include PC, there's still a lot more that they can add in there, especially for all these studios that they recently acquired that haven't even really scratched the surface yet of what they're capable of. There's so much more that they can do, and they're already at 10 million subscribers. I don't even think that shipping on PlayStation, as an example, is really going to stunt that growth for them, and that's what they're going for. Another common notion I'm seeing is, okay, well, if a sale is a sale, why doesn't Sony release on Microsoft? But the unfortunate reality is that we can say it doesn't work like that for Sony and Microsoft. It doesn't, whereas it works the other way for them. It couldn't be more clear, the diverging paths between these companies. Sony is more traditional. They're going for regular released games, big budget titles, and they are going to have market leadership. In all likelihood, at least initially from what we're seeing, we have every indicator in the book telling us they're going to sell more PS5s than Microsoft sells Series S and X. And that's even why Microsoft went out of their way this past week to say maybe don't look at console numbers. They're well aware that they're probably not going to sell as many, at least in the short term, and that's why they're far more platform agnostic than Sony. That's why they have far more subscribers to Game Pass, because they've been more aggressive in that area. And so if that's what they're going for, if they're going to scale, if they're trying to reach 2 billion gamers through mobile phones and PC and wherever, I mean, that's on them. Sony is just not as platform agnostic, and so it means much more to them to keep big PlayStation IP on PlayStation. They're still testing the waters of PC, but you get my point. And so that's why we just can't say the same thing for Sony to Microsoft, but we can for Xbox to PlayStation. I mean, only time will tell, but it seems like at least my initial hunch might be correct, but I still think they're playing their cards. They're not showing all their cards and how they'll approach this deal. But anyway, with all that said, it's time to get to Let's Talk Plus, our weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. If you would like to win a $10 code, it's very easy. Follow the link down below. We do this every single week on Let's Talk PlayStation. Supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to pay for your games. Those are all of our news stories, and our first week of PS5 was very busy, so our coverage finally kicked off. We had an unboxing of both models, in-depth UI walkthrough, noise and heat test for PS5 versus Series X, a bunch of PS4 models, tips and tricks, things to get you started when you get your PS5, review of all the accessories, and here we are on Friday, so that will start up for the normal Friday uploads. And we got more coming, PS Now and PS5, PSVR, more accessories getting reviewed. Probably a trophy challenge is on the table very soon for PS5 as well. I'd like to do that, play a little bit more of it. And we also hit 500,000 subscribers here on this channel, which I can't believe, and I genuinely mean that, because when I started this in 2012 covering PS Vita content, I thought this was more of a niche that, you know, could maybe get some attention, but not much, and here we are, so thank you, I really appreciate it. I wish I could thank everyone individually, which I've been trying to do on Twitter, but you know, it does actually get harder when you get this much more viewership, but I do try to reply to everybody, so I know I've got a lot of PSM messages sitting, a lot of DMs on Twitter. I'm trying to respond to everybody, but it just takes me a little bit longer, so hold out if you've sent me something. I'll get back to you, but otherwise, thank you so much. I'm incredibly thankful for all of your support, especially through this buildup of PS5, and now we've got a whole generation to cover, so that'll be fun. But that's it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.